This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is a compassionate and highly skilled optometrist with a strong background in clinical care and research. His passion for eye care began in high school after being fitted with overnight ortho-k lenses that halted his nearsightedness. After earning degrees in neuroscience and economics, a personal eye injury further inspired him to pursue optometry. He is especially passionate about myopia management and is proud to care for patients of all ages. He's optometrist and co-owner of Metuchen Vision in Somerset, Eyecare. He is Dr. Tobin Ansel. Tobin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So Tobin, what was the most important thing that helped you grow your empire?
I think we could kind of summarize it in a single patient interaction and kind of really streamline what I wanted to do as far as a practice owner and an optometrist in general. It was a patient that was enrolled in the myopia management program. And we had actually dropped the ball quite a bit. We had enrolled, we talked about this concierge service that we were going to provide, and then they canceled one time and they never got called back. So, 2, 3, 4 weeks went by and they never got another call. We never rescheduled. They finally rescheduled and we didn't have the contacts that they needed at that point, which they were trying to do a soft multifocal. So it was just issue after issue and after issue, and it was just mounting up. And I was in that room and they were airing their frustrations. And I'm thinking, yeah, you have every single right to be frustrated here. And I was in my head and I was like, so how do we handle this? I felt like there was two options. One was we can kind of slip it under the rug. Hey, sorry about that. It won't happen again. Let's just keep rolling with it. And the other option I was thinking was like, we should really just own up to it 100%. Own up to it and, feel their frustration. And you should probably, I was borderline probably more frustrated than they were because, that's not at all what we talk about as far as a global concierge service. So, what I did was, I extended the myopia management program. I discounted the program fees. And at the time you're losing a little bit of revenue at that point, but the mindset is, these are patients that are going to be in your practice for 5, 10 years. And they're going to, bring in other family members. When it comes to myopia management, parents wind up seeing you, grandparents winding up seeing you, start seeing siblings. And that small adjustment, maybe you'll lose a little revenue, but long-term, it pays off in dividends. And it really kind of framed my mindset as far as how I want to deliver patient care and how we want to grow the practice. And that's where a mindset shifted me, and I was able to move forward with that kind of headspace.
Okay. And as far as, so what would you say the one lesson out of that was for you? Like, what was the most important thing there?
The most important thing was, not thinking further ahead, right? For future thinking, forward thinking, and being able to make decisions in the moment that might not make sense for that day, but would make sense for, the long-term growth of the company. So it's just really just trying to always think ahead.
Yeah. And in your two locations, are you, do you do myopia control primarily at both of them? Is it sort of like, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So one of them I started, one of the locations, Somerset Eyecare, we started kind of from the ground up. The second location we actually purchased from another doctor that was doing a lot of ortho-k, but not in the realm of myopia management, just doing ortho-k as far as, outpatient service. So that was a little bit easier to convert into patients that wanted to, continue to myopia management.
Okay. And as far as as you're growing your practice, that's kind of a good story there. But what else did you run into that you didn't expect?
So I think the first part is the patient education. It is such an uphill battle initially when patients aren't aware of what you're trying to discuss. It in your heart, in your soul, how important it is, But when you try and dump all this information on a patient, a lot of the reaction is like, whoa, I've never even heard of this. Why are you like giving me so much information at a time? So it really is that kind of delivering it in bite-sized snippets where the patients can understand it. And sometimes you bring them back in 6 months, you check refraction. I'm talking specifically about myopia management, but you bring them back, you give them the information, and as they hear it more and more often, they come up with different questions. And as they understand it more, you get a little bit more buy-in. Secondarily, it's actually just staff, right? So staff have to understand it and appreciate it at the same level that you do. Whether that's myopia management, we do sclerals, whether that's general patient care, how we deliver care, they have to buy into what your goal is and what you want to deliver. So being able to discuss that with them, making them understand um, your goals, and making sure that they agree with those goals, really makes a big difference. And I think that was an obstacle that we had to overcome at both locations.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So why grow, right? Like you could have just stuck with one. What was that? What was the reason to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, just personally, I'm just like, I'm not happy with stagnation. I like to learn. I like to do new things. I like to expand my knowledge base. So the idea of, I did that as far as optometry. I enjoyed the research. I like just getting into the nitty gritty. And from that business aspect, I enjoy that too. I like getting into the nitty gritty. I like seeing, how can we do this better? How can we expand it? How can we provide better care? How can we, provide, a good place for staff to work, things like that. So it's always that, give me something new. Let me try something new. Let me do something better. And let me provide it to more people. And I think the idea of growing comes from that essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. And if you I'm curious what um you have a deep expertise in myopia management. It's probably one of these situations just like Michael Jordan, right? He's not a great coach because he does it so well. But try to break it down for folks who may be considering myopia control management
Yeah.
and myopia, specifically creating a program.
Yeah.
What are some of the basic tenets you have around your program and how you set it up?
Yeah. So I'm going through this right now. I think you were spot on. We have a new associate, and I'm trying to explain it to her, and I'm just like dumping knowledge on them, and it's just really hard for them to, you know, fully understand it because you need that kind of big picture, and then you kind of work down to the nitty gritty. But basic tenets is that patient education that we discussed about. That is the number one thing that's going to be your biggest obstacle. You need to make sure that you are having that discussion with as many patients as possible. That's the number one, right? So the patients need to know that this practice provides this, even if they're not actively pursuing myopia management. I have these discussions with, our elderly patients because they have parents with young kids, or they have kids that have grandchildren and things like that. So the discussion has to become very like global in your practice. And I think that's the number one. And then also I prefer to do 6-month follow-ups for these patients after you see them, because even if they're not buying into them, I want them to appreciate what we're discussing. So I'm saying, hey, your child is at risk for progression. Progression of myopia has these ocular health risks, but they need to see it at that point. So when you get home in 6 months, we measure axial length, we check refraction again. And when we're documenting it, when we're graphing it on a chart, it becomes a little bit more real, and it's something that they are able to appreciate or understand what you're trying to accomplish. So I think those are the two main things: is the patient education, and then documenting the changes over time.
Okay, interesting. How's that going, by the way? Trying to teach this to your associate. What are some lessons learned there?
One is, sometimes they just might not be as passionate as you are, and everybody has their own niches that they enjoy. I think, even if they're not passionate, I want them to know it enough that they can be like, okay, this patient can benefit from my pain management. Let me refer over to Dr. Ansel, and he'll take care of it, or refer to another associate that enjoys doing myopia management. So that aspect we're getting to. The other struggle is the new associate's a new grad. So at the same time that we're teaching myopia management, they're just trying to become more efficient and, be able to see the patients regularly, recommend appropriate glasses. So it's being methodical about what you're presenting and making sure that they're able to receive it without overwhelming them.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think there's some good lessons learned for everyone trying, even if it's not myopia control, it's anything. So,
Sure. Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
one thing that we help find helpful in our office is doing once a week chart reviews, where the doctors will compare notes, like, oh, what about this? Oh, this you could have done this differently. Oh, I really liked how you did that, and maybe I'll use that with my patients too, because the way you messaged it. That seemed to help a lot with like our dry eye and myopia control practices too. Do you all do
Right.
anything like that?
Yeah, we do. I do it actually usually about weekly, and we just have it, especially if they had struggled with a particular patient or they had difficulties coming to the correct diagnoses, or then we have that discussion. I lucked out because I did my residency at of the A, and then I'm still a part-time attending there, so I still get a lot of experience as far as training interns and residents. So it's it's an easier transition for me than maybe the other associates that we have to have that kind of discussion, that back and forth. But it's yeah, still, especially when it's private practice and it's faster pace. It's harder to make sure you make those times, but that's really critical to kind of carve out those moments to get them to a higher level.
Gotcha. That makes sense. A lot of folks are dealing with, rising employee costs, skills gaps, especially with something more technical like myopia control and reimbursement reductions. How do you deal with the balancing those challenges around labor and reimbursement?
Yeah, it's difficult. Not a easy thing to handle. We are, as far as myopia management, it's a cash based service, so we're not taking insurance for that. And we have that discussion up front. We let them know that I frame it as this is preventative care. This is something that we're doing to prevent future ocular health issues. And I think most families or patients are familiar with that. Insurance doesn't like covering preventative care. It's more of a reactive care system that we have here. So that kind of understanding, when we explain it in that way, it makes it more more acceptable to patients for that.
Gotcha.
And, and then as far as training, as far as for staff, it's difficult as well. They're so busy with other things, and having them have this high touch service in the middle of everything else, where I'm just like, no, take your time with these patients. We really want them to understand like their how they put the lenses in, and contact lens insertion is a time intensive
Mhm.
part of myopia management. So having them have that extra care for that is difficult. But what we do is when we're onboarding new staff, we take time to really educate on the importance of myopia management, and we let them know that this is an important part of the practice. So we try to get them on board earlier than later.
Gotcha. Well, are you having shortages of staff at all? I'm just curious if you're experiencing that or not.
Not so much shortage. We have a lot of turnover, which I'm probably sure you've heard. Um, we are in that process of hiring and having that turnover, but I think what we're trying to do, and which we've changed recently, is really trying to be more methodical and having those kind of stepwise learning for staff, for particularly what we're talking about right now would be technicians. Is don't throw it all at them at once. We slowly build it up, because it is overwhelming. That the technician, especially at our office, it's not an easy job. It's demanding. It's high paced. It's has a lot of responsibility. So if you throw it all at once and be like, all right, this is what you got to do, go do it. 3 days later, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
So it's maybe setting up a ladder system where you're slowly building up their knowledge base, and letting them excel at each of those ladder steps before you put on the next one can make a big difference.
That's a good insight for sure. And then figure out what is that latter step. So,
Right.
is there any examples that you have around that might be helpful for folks listening?
Yeah, it's a work in progress, but I think what we first try to do is get them very comfortable with all the pre-testing machines, because those are kind of push button things. Those are things you could pick up and get them very efficient and fast at them. We have a lot of machines. We have the OCTs, we have the Claris, we have the visual field. All of them have their own quirks
Yeah.
that they need to learn and get used to. And we really try and get them seeing those difficult patients that can't sit still for the photos. And, those are the challenging patients. But if they can master that, then we go into the next level. Maybe that's getting them doing testing in the exam room, whether that's visual acuity or doing a partial history. And then we work our way up from there, contact lens, INRs, and things like that. So as long as they're discrete steps and you could train them for those discrete steps, then it's really easier to understand when that's done. And then we can go to the next one.
That's pretty good. So train them on the basics, like how to use the equipment and the tools. And
Right.
then it's like, okay, now how do you deal with the edge cases around those? Like kids are
Right.
sometimes tough to take photos of. And then it's like, okay, and then we advance you to the next thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what you run into is sometimes they start to feel like they're plateauing. They're like, I just can't figure this out. And then we kind of drill even harder. We're like, okay, let's take some extra time to do this and let's simulate the difficulties that they're having. And then we'll kind of go from there. And then I think having that as the testing part coming up first is good, especially for those staff members that aren't used to customer service, that aren't used to patient interaction, because those are like little snippets of patient interaction. And that's before they get into like a full patient history where they're sitting and them asking them problems and questions and why they're here. It's like a good initial interaction for them.
I like how you break it down in terms of that. And where do you see drop off with people? Like you're saying turnover can be high. I imagine, and if you need performance and like, where do you typically see people dropping off in that cycle?
I think the highest area of drop off is likely when we get to history, because that's a difficult. I mean, even for doctors, sometimes getting an accurate history can be difficult. So, getting that kind of entrance history, being efficient with it, is a difficult part of technicians, and I think that's a drop off point. But even beyond that, I would also think that just overall patient flow can be a drop off point. When you have 3 to 4 doctors running at the same time, it's hard to know what is the next appropriate step that technician can be doing to make sure the office flow is continuing. We're still toying with the idea of having one technician with one doctor to see if that could improve flow. But right now, our technicians are floating, so they'll pick up the next patient that's available. They'll run them through. So it gets difficult when they don't know, should I take that office visit yet? Should I start the INR contact lens? Should I take the next exam that's been waiting? Sometimes they get there, but that it takes time. And if they don't get to that point after, extensive training, then we have decisions that we have to make.
Okay. Do you follow anything like EOS or anything like that? Have you heard of that?
We did. Yeah, we did follow it prior. And it was effective at the time. It did have a little bit of a drop off after we were using it for some time, but at the time that we were doing it weekly, it was effective, at least for the technicians when we were having those the weekly meetings. But yeah, then we had a lot of turnover, and it was difficult to keep up with them. So we're doing something, a modified version of EOS. But
What are you doing now? Just curious.
yeah, so we have weekly meetings where we talk about improvements and seeing what can work best for them. Sometimes those meetings are actually hands-on, where we're like in the pre-testing room and talking to the new technicians and trying to get them comfortable with certain tests, or we're in the exam room and going over history or whatever it is. But I think overall, whatever it is, whenever, regardless of the department, it's taking that 1 week where you're taking 30 minutes of the day and, checking in with them and figuring out what difficulties they're having or what needs to be improved. It gives you a lot of insight onto what people on the ground floor are doing and like how they're kind of in it every single day. We're stuck in the exam rooms in the back. So it's important to hear what they have to say, because, maybe we don't realize what's going on out there.
As far as your practice, I'm curious, what are you excited about in the future as you grow? You guys are myopia, thrive in myopia. You got a second location. What are you excited about? What's the future look like for you all?
Yeah, we're actually trying to get our third location here in close by here. So that's really exciting. It's taking up a whole lot of time, but I'm really excited about that, just to be able to deliver that care. The patient demographic's a little bit different, so I'm intrigued to see how well myopia management will be received as an more elderly population. So definitely a heavy disease is what the practice is currently doing. So the idea of marketing to a younger population, to children, families with kids, and that's exciting to be able to kind of figure that out because Somerset Eyecare, Metuchen, they're both pretty established, and we have that inflow of constant patients. But having to think outside the box and bringing in a new demographic into this new practice will be really interesting.
That is interesting. Why
Yeah.
the different brands? I'm curious. Why not put them under one brand?
It's we're still trying to figure it out right now. It just happened as far as our partners and what are not all the partners from Somerset wanted to buy Metuchen, so now Metuchen has different partners than Somerset does, but they're overlapping, so it's a whole complicated mess. But right now they're functioning really well independently. There's obviously a little bit of crossover, but the idea is to eventually get them all together and put them all together because I think as scale helps with these bigger as you expand further. So that's the eventual thing. We're just trying to figure out what's going to be the best way to integrate them all together.
Gotcha. Okay. What are you excited about for the field of optometry? Because there's a lot changing. You get your pulse on what's happening. What do you see? What are you excited about?
I think the innovation, why I like myopia management, I think, is because the rapid change, right? So there's something new coming out every month. There's a new study. There's a new research report. There's always something that's changing in that realm. And I think for optometry in a whole, it's happening. There's always something new to discover. There's new drugs on the market. There's new ways to help patients. So definitely excited about that. Scope expansion. Sometimes I've talked to a few people, it's controversial. Some people are not so into it. Some people are really pumped about it. And I think I'm more on the pump side. I'm just like, yeah, let's learn how to be and let's learn how to do more things and figure out how do we best care for the patients. And I think from the standpoint of the people and the naysayers is that, we're not trained for that, but I'm confident that we will get that training applied before we're, set free to do any of this kind of expanded scope procedures and things like that. So, but yeah, let's go for it. Let's try something new.
Like, why not? Let's go. Yeah.
Right.
I like it. Most folks, I think, at least in the bit of this podcast, have been excited about scope expansion. And so I think that's kind of where it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people to think the business is, practicing to the full scope of the state's laws if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know especially for New Jersey, it's something that's been actively being pushed.
So I like, all the things that you're saying about the direction and where you're going. I like how you think about your business. What's something that you think is counterintuitive the way you think about the business that you don't hear other optometrists talking about? Like, what's something that you go to meet with your peers and you're like, oh, I see it this way. How come they don't see it this way? Is there anything like that you see or come up with? If you need help, I can kind of probably draw it out of you, but have you come across that at all?
I have friends or colleagues that I graduated with that they're in private practice and they work in New York City, Staten Island, areas like that. And it's very focused on, frames and refractions and then capture rate and things like that. And guaranteed those are definitely very important, right? Those are still our revenue generators. But when I'm focusing, when I'm jazzed about things and I'm really thinking about how to improve it, it's these specialty services, right? And I'm like, let's talk about myopia management. Let's talk about how do we bring more of those patients in. How do I expand the scleral lenses in our practice and things like that. It's just I get so used to like talking to people that are also jazzed about myopia management, and it could just become like a silo where we're like talking to each other. But there's other there's other practices that are functioning and like heavy on frames and heavy on capture rate, and there's other practices that love disease, and like it's just a little bit different to hear other people with other niches and how they succeed with those. And I'm not sure if that fully answered the question, but
yeah, I think so. So what I'm hearing is that, some of the circles are pretty heavy focused on retail. You're focused on the myopia control. And
correct.
so I'm curious, what do you see different from a financial standpoint in your books? Because I know the model, the way it works with both of them, and I'm curious to see how you like to manage your metrics for success and things like that, like, if you're so heavy myopia management.
Yeah, I mean, we still definitely have, retail aspects of it, and that's still a main driver of our revenue. But for me, it's the metrics for myopia management is how many people are we have a code that we build for every patient that we discuss for myopia management. It's called an particular code. So we kind of flag how many people are discussing them. We do consults for patients, for a few patients that are interested. We do charge a fee for that just to make sure they're showing up for that. So those are two metrics that we're watching pretty regularly. So how many people are we talking about myopia management? How many are converting to consults? And then how many are converting to the actual program? There's a good amount that I discuss it in the exam room and they convert without the consult, but these are all different metrics that we're watching. And, when we had an associate start to do myopia management, we were really watching those carefully and seeing what was her conversion rate? How well was she doing in discussing this and explaining the importance and converting those patients? The other one is renewals, right? So we do yearly service programs, global fees, and then how often are they renewing, right? Yeah, obviously, you're going to have a little bit of drop off 20, 21, 22 when they go to college or, they start to stabilize for sure. But like if there's a 15-year-old that's been progressing and then they drop off and there's a question, like, what did we do differently or what did we not do that we should have done? That patient decided that maybe they didn't want to continue with the service.
So you're breaking it down by each step of the process. So on the
Correct.
front end, walking them through different steps, and on the back end, making sure they come back and go through different steps. On the front end, what are your if you will share whatever you feel comfortable, you don't have to share everything.
Yeah.
But how do you measure those steps? Like, is it so dry eye exam, come in for regular vision? Hey, you have dry eye presenting. Let's take you in for an ocular surface exam. Then we assess there. Then we go through dry eye protocols at that meeting. That's how a lot of folks do dry eyes, not everyone.
Yeah.
How do you manage? What's your quote unquote pipeline or way that you go to do myopia control?
Yeah, I mean, as far as year over year, we're looking for growth. Like when we first started, we were getting like huge growth, 30%
Yeah.
year over year growth, and now we're right around 15 to 20% growth, which is still great. But we want that to become accelerated as well. So, what I do usually for me, if it's my console that didn't convert, I'm a little bit more retrospective. And we try to figure out like what was the discussion there? Where was it where they didn't understand or they had any questions? And then same thing with the associate. If it didn't convert, we have a small discussion like, hey, like, so what happened there? Or was there anything that could have been done differently? Or what could we improve on? So it's still having those, small discussions, just trying to figure out what can be done differently for each patient that happened to not convert. I do that on a small scale when we're just talking about myopia management. There's always going to be a percentage of patients that are just like, nope, not interested. This doesn't speak to me. I don't have that. I don't value that. And then, but it's the patients that are like, oh yeah, I get that's an issue. We'll talk about it. And then we don't hear from them for a year or 2 years or whatever it is. So it's really just constantly looking back and what's working, what's not, what can be improved, and what can we change to make it more effective.
Gotcha. Okay. And as far as how when you're bringing I hit it on it earlier, like a new associate coming on board, how do you find that right associate for you? Because if someone who wants to do myopia might be different than someone who just wants to do refract and go, who just wants to treat dry eye or disease or glaucoma, right? Like how do you find that person?
It's tough. I mean, this is when I was talking to my partner, we were trying to have that discussion. I was telling her, I was like, how do we find it? I had the same exact question. Like, how are we going to find this doctor? And then we all have concerns. Oh, the new grads, they're going to take even longer to get successful. Should we have somebody with a couple of years experience under the belt so we don't have to build them up? And there's always an argument to say that, we have a particular type of service that we provide. And if we get a new grad, we're able to mold them, quote unquote, to get them to provide the service that we like to provide at the office. But when we were interviewing, it was like, where do they see themselves? Like, how do they think about patient care? How do they think about private practice? You just like to get an idea of where their head's at, So, her current associate was very, very pro private practice, wants to own her own private practice one day. And that was just already for us. They're like, oh, green flags. That's great.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to hear. But it was also how she described patient care. Like, we were like, all right, so like, what's your goal of patient care? Like, and she was just, it was very, I don't know the word for it. Maybe it's selfless, but it was in line with how we wanted our patients to be taken care of. So once we saw that, that one was like, all right, this is an easier decision to make once we know that, even if she's not there yet, she wants to provide that level of care, and we could probably get her there if she herself wants to be at that level.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you hire more on who and values
Correct.
versus natural skill sets.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And and I feel like, yeah, even if they're coming in as a new grad, and we know that, skills need to be developed even further. I, I'm a pro residency person, just because I feel, that's dedicated training that can't get elsewhere. So, we know that skills need to be developed over time, but if you're the right person, we
Mhm.
can develop the skills.
Yeah. I like that. Um, so I kind of want to change gears a little bit. I'd like to know what makes Tobin tick. Maybe that should be like a segment on your social media feeds. Tobin, what
Right.
makes Tobin tick? No, just messing with you. But can you share with me a story that was formative for you, that made you who you are today?
When I was younger, we would go to India a lot. My family's originally from India, so my grandma lived her whole life there. So when she was alive, we would go every year or 2 years. And that we lived in the southern part of India. It was very low income. We didn't have running electricity, we didn't have running plumbing and things like that. But we would get there, and then my dad, he was always just so proactive about helping that community, right? So we'd stop at the store, we'd just get a lot of food, and before we even got to my grandma's place. And it was just what we did, and it was just a part of who he was and who my parents were. And it's just like, it wasn't even a thought of, oh, we should do this. It's just, we have to do this. And it was just kind of very, very much a selfless thing. And they didn't think about it as charity. It's just, they thought about it as, this is what you do. And it was just, for me, it was like, all right, yeah, so like, why do we have to do this? Like, right, as a kid, I'm thinking like, why do we have to do this? Like, I don't like, and for them, it wasn't a thought of, why do we have to do this? It's just what we do. And it was just, and then it translated into like why they are both in healthcare, and they were both nurses, and they just do it, because it is them, right? And it's not like a choice for them. And like, and I think for me, like, providing that same level of care is just like, we you just do it. And it's not like a thought for me to be like, all right, you got to provide the best care possible. It's just, it is, right? Like, that's not something that crosses my mind as, should I provide the best care or should I not, or something like that. It's just, it is. And that's just like a small one. And then as I was growing in optometry, like mentoring, I had when I was shadowing, I had optometrists that would just take extra time if there was an issue, or see patients multiple times in the day, and just because they cared about making sure that it was right. It wasn't about the insurance bill or anything like that. It was like, there was a break. Yeah, you need to get paid, but you provide the care, and then everything else follows. So for me, it just started at that young age, and it's always kind of just snowballed from there. And then optometry gave me a great avenue to be able to provide care.
That's a cool story. How like I think we've all been there as kids. Like, why do we have to do this? Right? It could be anything.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
of course.
Um, if you had to give advice to your younger self, graduate 1 week out of OD school, what advice would that be?
I would say dive into everything.
Okay.
You don't know what you get. Because I'm like, I graduated, I was like, I want to do ocular disease the rest of my life. And I had no idea what I was talking about. So just get it, like, get into it. Even if think you hate it, like, I didn't imagine doing low vision, and now I thoroughly do. I do low vision for a half a day a week, and I love it. And it's, you just don't know what's going to resonate with you. So try everything. If you have the ability, just try it all. Do some sclerals, do some ortho-k, do some low vision, get dirty with the ocular disease. Like, do everything, and then you hone and find what's good for you. Like, don't pigeonhole yourself so soon.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's good insight. So, kind of, and how much of the career do you think that would be worthwhile, just as until they find something, like until you found something? Would that be sort of your playbook? I'm just curious how much exploring you would do.
And I'm sure, as you get further into your career, it might change over time, but
Yeah,
I like the openness of it. I like to be able to do different things and just trying something new and trying other aspects. So, um, I don't think there's a set limit of time where you can't continue to try things. But I think over time, as you keep doing these things, you're going to find things that just speak to you and call out to you, and you feel like that's your passion. And then you could lean into it more. But I would say just don't close doors. Like, don't close any doors. Just like keep everything as open as possible when you're first starting out.
yeah, I like that. So, Tobin, if people want to reach out to you or find more about you,
Yeah.
where can they find you? What's your most if you hang out on social media, where is that, or where can folks find you?
Mostly you can just reach me out to email. That's the best way, or LinkedIn. My email. Oh yeah, it's DRANSEL, Dr. Ansel at metuchenvision.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Always happy to help, whether it's a new grad or anybody with questions about myopia management. I love talking.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Tobin Ansel, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, audience. If you learned something or laughed, share this podcast or YouTube video with a friend, and make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you see a link in the show notes to book a meeting, I'll send you a free copy of my new book, Optometry Redefined. Thank you again, Dr. Ansel, for being on the show. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.